The views and opinions expressed on this platform are of me, myself, and I, not any agency I'm affiliated with. So please do not take what I say personally. If you have not guessed by the title of the episode or the cover photo for this episode, and if you're wondering, that newborn baby is my new nephew, Atlas Clay Fairbanks. I haven't met him yet, but he is already the light of my life, and he's so beautiful and he's so handsome, and I just love him so much already. And, anyways, this podcast would not mean so much to me, and it wouldn't be like such a huge accomplishment for myself if it was not for my listeners, whether you're one of my friends and you give me feedback, or if you just listen and I get emails of topic ideas, which I so appreciate. It's you guys that make this mean the world to me. I've got some ideas for episodes coming up. This Wednesday, it's going to be the last partner in Louisiana that I had, Logan Bajeron. It's a good one. It's already recorded. It's going to drop this Wednesday. It's going to be awesome. After that, I've got one of my friends who's a firefighter and paramedic, and kind of his perspective of like bridging fire and EMS. After that, super stoked. I've got a police officer that I know from Louisiana that we ran calls together and stuff like that. So, in the same idea, like bridging police and EMS, because we're all first responders. So, kind of like general theme of that. An episode after that, it's going to be another topic idea of what can a layperson do as far as like in an emergency or anything like that. And I'm kind of bridging that with like how to help us as first responders. So super stoked for that one. Couple of other things that I've got in the works coming out with those. So tune in. It's going to be some good stuff. And if you don't think so, you don't have to listen. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Sorry. So this is kind of a bonus episode also. Normally I'm trying to keep it as like a weekly basis. Eventually I'll move into probably like a bi-weekly basis every other week, something like that. I don't know. Again, from what I've said of day one, we're making this up as we go along. So who knows? So I want to throw this in because it's a topic idea from a listener and one of my favorite medics I've ever worked with, trying to boost his ego right now. For my birthday, not only did he give me a multi-dose epi vial, uh, he also let me start a 14 gauge IV in one of the veins that I told him, like, I think the second time we worked together, I was like, dude, that vein, it's about to bust. It's popping. So he let me start a 14 gauge IV in that, which, if you don't know, it is equivalent to a McDonald's straw. It is a large gauge IV. So he's a hero for that one. I only bled him out just a little bit. He's fine. That medic and I actually ran a call where this lady had delivered a baby. Let me start over. So the call came out, and through our dispatch, through reading the CAD notes, and I'll just give you the general call. So I'm not going to go through the whole step by step. It's a lot. But after we get on scene, we get there, the midwife is there, and from what we gathered, there was like a birthing pool in the living room, and the mom had intentionally wanted to deliver this baby at her home in the birthing pool with this midwife, which, if you want a midwife, that's cool. Women have delivered babies outside of hospitals for years and years and years. Like, whatever your views are, you do you, boo. I just fully believe that we are at a point in history that you can have your midwife, your doulas, all of your cultural, ethical, whatever you want. That's cool, do you, but medical professionals are also here for a reason. And this is why I say this, especially from my experience here in Utah. When there's a call for a potential someone delivering a baby, either we have enough time to deliver, like the hospital delivers, or we're about to deliver at the house because like they've waited too long and they can't get out to the car, whatever it is, that's not the point. But my experience with midwives is that there are trained professionals to be able to handle these situations and stuff, but typically when we get there, they've kind of run out of options, and now we're behind on the 8 ball. Not saying that's the case in every situation, but I'm just saying that's what I've experienced. So we get on scene and the midwife is basically telling us like, hey, yeah, she had this baby in the birthing pool at home. I hadn't gotten there yet. And I look inside the birthing pool and like there's supposed to be water, yeah, because you birth the baby in the water. It's just dark red and it's very full. Not like, oh, well, you're having a baby in this pool. No, like full, like the mom might be floating and it just, I'm not going to go into graphic detail, but it's just a lot. And the mom is like sitting on a towel soaked in blood because she's still bleeding. So the midwife tells us that she got there and the mom had delivered the baby. I look over at the baby real quick. Dad's holding the baby's fine. We did like a quick assessment later on, and like the baby's fine. It had been well over a couple of minutes past like the crucial assessment stages and stuff. So baby's fine. Keep that in mind. But the mom is pale. We took her basic vitals as we're getting the history from the midwife, and her blood pressure is trash over trash. And it's not like, oh, well, she just had baby, she lost a lot of blood. Like she lost an extensive amount of blood. And I'm trying to figure out like, okay, like did her uterus rupture? Like what actually has happened? And then the midwife tells us as we're starting to try to get an IV, like while we're in the house, waiting on fire department to get there so that way they can help us load her up and stuff like that. The midwife proceeds to tell us that she tried manual contractions. And if you don't know what those are, I didn't either. So I looked at the midwife and I said, you did what? This woman, and this is a Clifford the Big Red Dog sized no ever, stuck her hand, not just her hand, I'm sorry, not just her arm, like I wish I was exaggerating, almost up to the elbow inside of this woman's, to keep it PG, birth canal and tried to massage the placenta, which again, I don't, maybe it's above my pay grade, but from what we are taught and what I'm 90% sure most OB doctors and birthing baby doctors, everybody is taught that you don't reach in and grab anything. So this woman reached in, grabbed the placenta, and I don't know if she started pulling, twisting, but the umbilical cord, which was cut from the baby's fine again, um, but it it ripped. So now the placenta is just hanging. It was so much. So this woman is bleeding, has been bleeding for a while. The midwife is telling her she gave her this, that, and the other, and so we load her up, does all this, blah 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 blah. And it wasn't until we were en route to the hospital, and this woman is like, the patient who is the mom is like, "Hey, and I've got two large bore IVs going. I've got fluids going, watching her, and watching heart rate, blood pressure, doing all the things." She starts telling me that her legs are going numb, so I'm like, "Hey," and she's like, "And I'm also kind of getting a little sleepy." I'm like, "No, ma'am, we're not doing this today." So, anyways, I realized en route that we didn't get a second unit. And on scene, like I told the dad, I was like, hey, if y'all just want to transport the baby, either that or we have to wait for a second unit because we never got one while we were on the way to the hospital. Was that bad on us? Yes, no, I don't know. But it had been about 10 minutes, 15 minutes after the baby was born. So, like, mm, I don't know. Honestly, and here's how I looked at it while we were still on scene because like we we could have left and had that second unit still go to the house. Like, yeah. But with the dad being fine with transporting the kid, and I can't wait for a call from HR for this. It saves that family money from an additional ambulance bill. And so, like, we're not going to have the mom transport with the baby because she's so critical and she could have passed out at any given moment. And family was headed up to the hospital regardless. And they even said, like, well, we're going to bring the baby in to get checked out. I was like, yes, thank you. And in the back of my mind, I said, that's what I just said, but whatever. But I never really like from the people I've talked about this call, I never really have gotten like a was that the right thing to do or should we still have gotten a second unit? I don't know, possibly, maybe so, but this call like it stuck with me because like just that idea of the what ifs and well, it depends situations. So when Dustin texted me and was like, here's an episode idea for the podcast, should moms transport with newborns? I was like, oh, yeah, we're going to go over this. Thankfully, like we had a good outcome with our patient, but also what would have happened if mom would have gotten worse during transport and we brought the baby with us? So now mom's deteriorating, and we don't, what are we going to do with the baby? Like, we brought the midwife with us because I literally, the only reason is so that way the midwife could do like the fundal massage. And if you don't know what that is, you can go look it up. Sorry. But it basically, like, you're massaging the stomach, and it kind of stimulates like the uterine contractions, stops the bleeding, stuff like that. And it's what they do in the hospital. It's what we're taught. So I literally told her, like, do this, and in the back of my mind I said, don't do anything else. You've done more than enough. So like, thankfully we didn't have the baby with us, and the mom didn't get worse. But what if she had? You also have, what if the baby begins to get worse? I mean, how how distressing would it be? This mom just gave birth to this baby, and like, typically, if you go down that route, and typically, if you're going down the route of you're doing CPR on a baby, like especially a newborn, like things were already going not so well during the birth. Um, so now this mom who's already, like, she's had this rush of hormones and endorphins and just all of the things, they're going to the ER, and now you're doing CPR on her baby in front of her. And like, oh my God, God forbid both start to crash. And like, if it's just you back there, what do you do? Who do you focus on first? And not to mention, you have all of these things that could happen like inside of the ambulance. If you look at the factors that could happen externally, outside of the ambulance, you have so many things, such as people don't know how to drive and honestly have no due regard for pulling out in front of the ambulance. They'll just literally, oh my God. Anyways, and not to mention, you got bumpy roads, you got potholes, you got, depending on where you're at, you got deer running out in front of you. People just slam on their brakes, pedestrians run out into the middle of the road, etc. So if whoever is driving slams on their brakes, I mean, this is going to be really morbid, but it's true. That's a projectile football of an infant. Or even, kind of like I'm going to go into in a little bit, on a pediatric call, you're looking at like the physics of mass times gravity and Newton's laws. It's like playing a game of chance and kind of Russian roulette of like, oh, what's going to happen if we do this? I don't know. We'll see. And then having Murphy's Law, like peeping around from the corner watching and waiting for that one prime moment when you've let your guard down. And like, the heavier the object is, a baby, a whole child, the harder it would be to hold on to it if things go bad and like a sudden stop ensues, or you get hit from the side, because you can't control those things. Those are, you cannot control what other people are doing on the road. And that sucks. There are people who reached out to me when I was getting feedback on social media and said that they held their kid the whole way to the ER, and they were so thankful to have that. And like, I'm here for it. And maybe, yeah, like if you just kind of strap, no, if you buckle, that's a better word, buckle the kid in with the parent on the stretcher, and, then they're secure. And then the parent's holding them. But like, what if you got to start doing stuff? You're going to do stuff to the child who is the patient on top of the parent. Like, sketchy stuff. I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job. I'm not trying to tell you like what you need to do and what you don't need to do. These are just things that I just want to talk about. So it's your call, it's your patient or patients, but it is risky. And like, in this debate, if you will, we're not even addressing like, if you have a pregnant mom who's having contractions and you're on your way to the hospital and she starts to deliver, like, do you get a second unit? Do you just keep going? And then what if there's not another unit available? What if the town has exploded, not literally, but like in the number of calls, like it kind of does. They come in clusters. If there's not another unit available, like, I guess you just pull over and deliver. And what if you're like 20 minutes from a second unit nearby or anything like that, and the baby's not stable, and or the mother isn't either? Do you just load and go? And then, like, someone else brought it up, there's an added difficulty, if because like kids compensate so well, and they'll hold out with like, they look fine, until they just bottom out. And especially, maybe this is just me, but if you have a respiratory call with a kid, strapping down an already sick kid to a stretcher and causing distress risks the kid tiring out faster and exacerbating their symptoms. Like, imagine being that parent and watching your kid go from coughing and just being like sick to becoming more and more tired. And hopefully the medic is able to keep their head and not like, I'm not going to say I've done before, but like, start dropping stuff. And then like, you get flustered, because I'm not even going to act like I'm not. I'm one of those people that on pediatric calls, like I wish I could change it and I will one day. I'll get better, but I just I get scared. Maybe it's because we don't run on enough pediatrics or maybe it's just because, past calls whatever, but maybe that's just me. And again, I have no monopoly on this answer. I got a lot of good feedback. Again, thank you everybody who addressed this and answered back. And personally, I'm not trying to tempt the EMS gods because I work tomorrow, but I can tolerate pediatric calls well-ish. They do stress me out. It is those OB calls, those pregnancy calls, the I think I'm having contractions calls that stress me out. And yes, I know that complicated births in the field are rare, and delivering a baby is even an EMT skill, and as a paramedic, you should know what to do. Sure, and I know that women used to pop a squat in a rice field and deliver babies with no medical supervision and like continue doing whatever they did for the rest of the day. However, even with all of this, I have literally I've literally paced in the back with a pregnant patient who was getting too close for comfort to having a baby with me in the back. And I mean, I'm just gonna be really honest. She even told me, she's like, "You're doing great, sweetie. Everything's gonna be fine." I'm like, "I know." And I'm sweating. I'm like, "You're doing great. We're almost there. Don't worry." And she's like, "I'm not worried, but I think you are." And I said, "I'm sorry. I am just a little bit." So I think honesty with your patients is crucial, not to the point of being like, "I don't know what's wrong with you. I don't know what to do." But, just like, "Hey, I'm a little nervous too." Not always, but in that moment, I I was struggling to control my nerves. So, yeah, whatever. I know people who, even in EMT school and even in paramedic school, have said like, "Oh man, I want to deliver a baby in the field." And like you hear about those medics who are like, "Yeah, I've delivered 3 babies and this, that, and the other." I have no desire to deliver a baby. I don't want kids of my own, let alone to be the one who gets all those fluids everywhere. And I'm sorry if that, I think that's gross. I don't, maybe because I'm just not emotionally attached or something, I don't know, but I don't see the birthing process as beautiful or like this miracle. I'm sorry, I think it's just gross. Anyways, so going into like my thoughts on all of this, you have the big reason of why a second unit. Legal implications and even protocols state not to allow a mother and a newborn to transport together, like where the mom is holding the baby. You always have that option of using the car seat that your ambulance should have and or the car seat of the parents and just buckling the baby down into the car seat and strapping the whole car seat down and transporting the baby that way with mom on the cot. And I've done it and it's possible. If the kid was in a wreck, like was involved in a wreck, but is still in a car seat or the car seat's intact, anything like that, I'm even game for just taking the car seat and the child staying in the car seat if it's still intact and if it's still good, if we have time. You also get into the area of, well, if you do that, that newborn is going to miss out on that skin to skin contact that's so crucial and vital in the first couple of minutes of their life. And then, not to mention the necessity of like the baby breastfeeding as early as possible in order to stimulate uterine contraction and control bleeding and or deliver this placenta. It's all part of the birthing process. So another thing to consider though with the car seats that we have is that if the family doesn't have one and whatever, like whatever the situation is, our car seats are really only compatible with kids after so many pounds in their weight. So like I've seen a medic before kind of just like pat around the baby and just to keep the baby like nice and snug in the car seat, transport like that. On a very important aspect as well, something I am going to throw in here because it is something that I stand by. Patient care extends beyond just interventions and skills that you do. And like as it's just important to get your assessment and get your vitals and stuff, also reassuring that parent, even if it's just one person's getting vitals and asking history and stuff like that, and then in the middle of that, like you have someone go find mom or just like take a second as you're loading the kid up and be like, hey, we're doing the best we can, or whatever it is you say to kind of comfort your patients. I heard about a call where this kid had drowned and everyone's so focused on the kid that somebody eventually looked in a corner and the mom is so far away from the kid crying. Like that makes my heart hurt. Like, yeah, especially for that kid, but also like It comes to a matter of we're trained in the medical field. We're trained with medicine and knowledge and skills and blah, 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 blah. But also, if you're in this job, you have to have that empathy and that emotional, like patient care side. Just kind of like, if you have the time, if there's no time, I'm sorry, like we got to compartmentalize this. But if you have the time, just taking those 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and just, putting your hand on the shoulder of the parent, whatever it is, and just giving that, it's an extension of patient care, if nothing else. So with reassuring the parents, even if you won't have them right in the back, explain in brief, short ways what you are going to do en route to the ER because that's the parent. They have responsibility of that child. You do for that short amount of time, but long term, it's the parents. So keep parents or family if like you have an older patient and it's not their, if it's like the daughter of the mom you're transporting, something like that, just keep them in the loop. Like at the end of the day, that is their loved one and they're trusting you to take care of them. After a lot of digging and trying to come up with a definitive answer, I just know at this point I'm definitely gonna get a second unit. If nothing else, you can always get a second unit and have like a medic or somebody right in the back with you that focuses on having like one patient, either the mom or the baby, instead of you trying to divide your attention between the two. But like at the end of the day, I mean, it's provider discretion, and most importantly, it's whatever your protocols and regulations imply. I don't want to get pulled into a supervisor's office and talk to you about this because I just have ideas, but like I would say it's a gray area when you start playing the what if game. And like it was said recently, you can what if any patient. Toe pain, you can what if yourself into a situation where it's like, well, what if they die right now? It's the what if game is very, I think it's good for pre-gaming on the way to a call of like, okay, well, what if it's this? What if this happens? Just so that way, like you're in a good mindset with your partner. But if you what if too much, you're just going to get stuck and you're going to get scared and it's going to prohibit you from being able to do the best for your patient. So, in most things of EMS and just the healthcare field in general, it all boils down to it depends. Do you risk the possibility of y'all getting in a wreck in the back and something worse happening to that baby because you want to have the mom and baby bond? Do you allow a newborn to be transported in another unit where, while it'll be distressing for that newborn and mom is going to be freaking out in the other unit, you can ensure that they're both getting quality, independent, individual care? Or do you just transport the newborn and if mom doesn't want to go with, you just have her right in because, I mean, you're only taking her child. She needs that at the end of the day. It's your call. As the provider, it's your call. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Um, it's kind of like a catch-all. If you have many options, there are many routes you can go down, and whatever you choose, dude, that's on you. So going into like the second half of this episode, in this idea, and this is kind of like a hot button topic for a lot of people. Should we allow parents to ride in the back at all? Should the family really get a say, like in if they get to ride in the back with their kid or their, granddaughter, grandson, whoever, or do we put everybody in the front and just buckle them up? But at the same time, on the way to the hospital, they're literally turning around, trying to look back at their mom, dad, sister, whoever it is, and just keep watching. So I'm kind of 50-50 on this. And this is kind of where I feel like a lot of people stand. If it's a pediatric, if the child is critical, I'm against having the parent in the back because it adds stress to the parents and it adds stress to the child because the child's already not having a good time. And then, like, they can sense their parents freaking out, which freaks them out. And like somebody told me in when I was trying to get feedback for this episode, this is more true or slash important the younger the child is. I would even add that even older patients where family want to ride with, I'm not going to have a fight on scene and I'm not going to prolong like getting the patient to definitive care just because I'm trying to prove a point. But I've also had a patient that seemed totally fine, but was kind of in that national registry. Is the patient sick or not sick that you can see from the doorway? They were in the sick category. The daughter was the only historian of the family, and like She had every medication that her mom was on and her like entire medical history and even physician names memorized. And it was cool. And it kind of gave me an opportunity on the way to the hospital to give, because I let the daughter ride with. I should have added that, sorry. It allowed me to kind of comfort the daughter because, the mom was going through a lot of health issues and it just wasn't a good time, and gave me the ability to know the full extent of medical history that this patient had. Love that for me. Until we were about 10 minutes from the hospital and the patient, so like the mom, kind of started becoming a little less responsive. She was getting a little sleepier. It was getting a little harder to wake her up. Her blood pressure dropped a little bit. Her heart rate started dropping. And like I had a good outcome with this patient transport and everything turned out good, but whoa, did I get lucky? And on a personal note, a few years back, and no, it was not anaphylaxis. I think I had an asthma attack. I don't remember what it was, but I just remember after the whole ordeal, Trevor telling me like he fought the medic on scene and not physically, but basically told the medic when the medic was like, "No, you can't ride with this." Trevor was like, and we were engaged at the time. He said, "No, man, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you, I'm riding in the back with her." And the medic was cool, thankfully, because if it had been me, I can't promise I would have said no to whoever was like talking to me like that out of spite. So I'm just kidding. Not really. So going back to the part two main idea of this episode, Alexis, what do you mean you're 50-50? Personal example, I had a call a few weeks back for a 4-year-old having a seizure. We get there. He is post-ictal. The seizure's done. He's just kind of out of it still. He didn't have a history of seizures. We went through our whole assessment, all the questions. The kid's crying, but he's just not having a good night. And the mom asked if she could ride with us. And my partner initially was like, no, if you do, you're going to have to ride in the front. And I was kind of down for that because the kid just like wasn't really doing his best. But the kid started coming to, and I noticed that he would come to even more when the mom was talking to him versus like these two strangers that walked in his house after he'd had this pretty traumatic experience of a seizure. Um, so the mom was like calming him down and stuff like that. And so we got to the ambulance and mom was on the bench seat. We got everything set up. So I looked at my partner and I was like, I'm going to have mom right back here, but wait before we take off. And I looked at the mom and I said, okay, here's the thing. And I said this very nicely, very professionally, very kindly. And I told her, I said, he looks a lot better now. He's coming out the woods. Everything's going good right now. I said, there's no promise that he can't become unresponsive, have another seizure. There are many things that could go wrong. I'm just being very honest. So if I have to give him a medication, if I have to do something, I just need you to like take a step back. Either scoot over, go to the other chair up there where it's like the head, it's at the head of the stretcher. And so I was like, I need you. I said, in all due respect, I need you to not get in my way. And she was cool for it. She was like, yeah, sure. And so the patient was fine. I ended up getting follow up later on that like they didn't find anything. And it was just kind of like this, kids have seizures sometimes. Just again, pediatric calls, man. They're an entire different breed of species aside from human. Like I don't understand them. Um, but it gave me a chance to be able to calm her. She kept her kid calm and like kept him from screaming and crying the whole way to the hospital, which kept me calm. So everybody won. So in that idea of like again, the honesty with your patients and it just kind of depends on the situation. I don't know. You also have to keep in mind that anything could go south at any given point. You also have to take in consideration the history of the child. If it's a child with like special medical needs, if they have a special disease that you may not know a lot about, that parent may have far more knowledge of this child's illness and especially the child's medical history than what you covered in paramedic school or EMT school. I've had a call where the mom literally asked to ride in the back so she could suction this kid's trach on the way to the hospital because, as she said, I know by heart the way he breathes in if he's about to have a mucus plug, or I can tell if he's not doing good in the way he looks at me. Like, yeah, sure, you can have the slurping noise job. And obviously, like, I monitored the whole way there just to make sure that, like, she was doing it right, but she does that day in and day out. Quite literally, she told me on the way to the hospital if her kid starts getting sick, she'll just stay up all night with him. And just to make sure she doesn't have to suction, like he's breathing fine, all of that. So she was perfectly calm, even through like when we got on scene and the child's oxygen saturations were trash. She was handling everything so well. And it prevented us, in my mind, like from getting to the ER and if we missed anything during the handoff report because the mom was there from the moment the child started getting sick until we got to the ER. So, like, to wrap all of this up, it may have been like an elongated episode, but so if you have a mom who just delivered a baby, as I learned, get a second unit en route, even if it's just that second unit comforts the stressed family members and you have one person riding in the back with you. And even if they just stare at the baby, it's always best to have and not need versus need and not have. But if you choose, however, to transport the baby or even a kid with the parent holding them, even if you secure the child where like they're seatbelted in with the parent, even if you whatever it is you choose to do, know that you are, in fact, risking that infant or pediatric's life if something goes wrong. Is that dramatic? Yeah, but it's always a possibility. And I'm sorry, but if I transport a mom and a newborn and we hit a bump or whoever's driving slams on their brakes, I can't promise I'll be reaching out to grab a baby versus bracing myself so I don't fall and get a concussion. I'm just being blatantly honest. And again, to reiterate, everything is so what if, and everything is such a gray area. But at the end of the day, and this is kind of my plug to not get called into an HR office or get a call from a supervisor if they listen, as always, follow your protocols. Because in the dramatic field of kind of where I was addressing, should you deviate from your protocols of how they say to transport a kid or what to do in this situation, blah, 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 if you deviate from your protocols, you're kind of on your own. So I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just kind of giving scenarios, given the general consensus of how everybody's kind of feeling, the main ideas, the pros, cons, and I'm sure I have not addressed enough, but those are just my 2 cents on it. And my last remark, I want everybody to get to the hospital, myself, my partner, my patient or patients, as safely as possible. I also hate the idea of a mom missing out on that skin to skin contact and not being able to have those like bonding moments with her kid. I also understand sometimes it's just you're so close to the hospital, it's not feasible to have a second unit. There are just so many what if scenarios, and I really 100% believe it is case by case dependent. I'm not telling you how to do your job. If you have any feedback, if you want to just tell me I'm wrong, go ahead. That's what I'm here for. If there's anything really good, I'll post it on the podcast Instagram or I'll just post it to my own personal Facebook. I'm here to learn, here to improve, and get conversations going. With that, so, guys, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, future topic ideas, please email me at 22 at the lips podcast at gmail.com. Again, that's 22 at the lips podcast at gmail.com. Thanks. Never stop learning and be safe out there, friends. But when that too much coffee. Thank you. Thank you, Max. I love Halloween cookies. I love my boys. My husband just brought me a cookie. Anyways,